Hi, John. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Good, good. Hey, the last time we had a chance to sit down and talk, it was right after the IPA meeting a couple weeks ago by now, and of course that was really successful, and I think well worth our time to go meet with those guys in Louisville. I guess the big question is, what have you been doing with all your free time lately?
Well, since that time, Greg, and that was an excellent meeting with the IPA. Were up at Alpha National last week, preparing for our meeting with Mr. Littleton. But it was a status update meeting, uh, and so we spent the majority of last week up there working with the representational and ENFA departments to get ready for that meeting.
Okay. So you did that, and then the following week, I think you traveled on Monday and you had your meeting with Mr. Littleton on Tuesday. So I guess everybody wants to know, how did that go?
Overall, I'd say it went really well. We did travel on Monday, spent a little time Monday afternoon preparing. Our entire committee support people, the representational staff, the ENFA. Jose's with us because he's an ex officio member of the committee. And overall, like I said, it was a really good meeting. Mr. Littleton has got some familiarity with our property. He assisted the previous mediator during this bargaining cycle.
Okay. How long did you guys meet? And kind of like, what did you guys cover?
So we met most of the day, actually, and we covered on a high level three different areas. We talked about our committee, our pilots, and we can spend a little time talking about our pilots here in a minute, Greg. I think that's important for everybody to understand the makeup of our group. Uh, ENFA gave an excellent presentation about FedEx's overall financial health. In fact, I think we just saw just a little while ago that they just announced another quarterly dividend of $1.38 a share, maybe. So we talked about that. We talked about our position relative in the pilot contracts relative to the industry, where we rack and stack there, both within the cargo and legacies like Delta and United. And then after that, we went through the purpose of the meeting, as stated in the agenda item, was for the association to go over the proposals and the associated costing. And that's what we did in the afternoon.
Okay. All right. You mentioned you had a chance, since Mr. Littleton hasn't really met all the pilots in this negotiating team. So what would, how did that go? And you said you wanted to talk a little bit about your members.
Right. So we spent a good amount of time introducing ourselves and explaining our own history uh, to Mark Littleton, so he could understand our perspective. We come from a lot of different walks of life and different airlines, and he's had a long career in the airlines, 33 years, went through multiple mergers. He was a flight attendant. He certainly understands that. So it was good for him to get to know us, to understand our personality. And from that, then we started talking to him, with him in the conversational mode, because you'd not want to just be in a briefing for that many hours about our pilot group and how, and a lot of it has to do with the demographics and how it's going to affect the ratification. If you don't mind, I'd like just to spend a minute or two talking about that. So
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
so we had and I might be referring to my phone because I don't have all these numbers committed to memory. If I'm looking down, that's what's going on. When the TA was voted on, we had about 5,800 people that voted on it. I think it was 5810. But there was a significant number of pilots that were ineligible to vote, also, roughly 400 or so. So with the passage of time, there's been a change in the demographics, and let me back up. We explained that our seniority list is kind of like, has a dumbbell effect. That there's over 55% of our pilots that were hired since 2015, and that there's almost 1,100 pilots that are going to be 60 or older by the end of 2025. There are some pilots in the middle, but it's not an equal distribution of the bell curve that you would think about. And we're 70+% commuter force, and all of this weighs in because when when we looked at the rejection of the TA. We did a post-mortem analysis. We saw that, like we explained to him how our seniority block system worked, and not that we're discounting the outlying domiciles, we did talk about that, but in Memphis, where it goes from 1 to 8, we explained in block 1, hey, it ratified like at 82 or 83% with the 17% rejection, but it went down linearly the closer you got to block 8, and actually when you got to block 8, it failed at an 88% or 87% with only a 13% approval. So then I go back to the 5810. So we had 5,800 or so and 400 pilots roughly that couldn't vote because they're on probation. Well, they're all now eligible to vote. And I think it's a very safe assumption to say, look, if 87 or 88% of their peers didn't approve that TA, they're most likely going to be in that same type of a mindset, and they're probably predisposed to voting no. And I think you could actually make a really strong case that it's going to be even a higher number in that because of everything we've endured since then. And on the other part of this is, we've had attrition since the TA. We've had about 265 retirements since then. We've had close to 100 resignations. That's totally understandable. We're probably going to see more based on, again, what the pilots have been experiencing, and they see what's available out there in the industry. So we have, it's a new hurdle that wasn't there in the last ratification. You approximately have got 400 pilots now that couldn't vote before that could, and they're probably predisposed to voting no. And you have people who are predisposed to voting yes because they wanted their retirement fixed, have aged out and left. So you've got, I'm not going to be very good at public math. Let's just say 700. You've got a 700 pilot swing here that creates it's not just a speed bump, but it's a significant factor when you consider what's going on in ratification. And that point, we had to hammer that home. We thought, because it's very important for us to convey that, look, both sides are sitting on the top of a failed tentative agreement, and 50% plus one, that can't work, because we need to be well above the margin of error, so that we can get this thing put to bed. So we did spend time talking about that and how we believe that influences how our pilots are going to vote, and what we need to do in order to achieve a solid ratification number.
So you just talked about the environment that we're currently working under for A2C, and how that even is going to start to be reflected in the mindset of our crew force. I know you guys do polling on a frequent basis. Was there anything from the last polling that shows you exactly where the mindset is of the crew force?
Yes, excuse me. Yes, there is. We run some pilot sentiment questions, and I'm not going to, as a policy, we don't give out the survey slides, but I'll just convey to you what it said. There's a question that is asked routinely: to what extent do you favor or oppose the way management is dealing with issues that only affect the pilots? It's been negative for a while, and it's really negative now. If the response choices were, well, I mostly favor how they're treating us, I strongly favor how they're treating us, I mostly oppose, or I strongly oppose. When you look at the polling, I mean, that slide just jumps out, because the mostly opposed is right here, and then if you took 3 times mostly opposed, that gets you to the strongly opposed, and if you add those two together, you're well into the 90% disapproval rate of how the pilots view the way management is treating the pilots. And that is a huge issue when it comes to ratification, because actually, I think it just causes the price of ratification to go up. The pilots are not happy. We warned the company that this was going to be a really serious mistake to going into sea. If they didn't have to, if we tried to find alternative ways, we were rebuffed on that, especially in early retirement. We've been told there's 881 pilots who were overstaffed. It's no wonder that our junior pilots are looking elsewhere. And so that number, it's crept up in the last couple months, and it's understandably why that's happening. That's totally understandable why that's happening. It's unfortunate, and we made the point to them that this was going to be a real mistake, and someone as they chose, just because they're going down a path, right, Greg? They're on a completely different timeline than what we're on, I think. There's the Drive initiative. They're out to take $4 billion in cost out by the end of FY25, which happens to be the end of this May. I think it's been reflective in the way the companies approached us at the table. Once we engaged and had dates, our committee always strives to turn proposals as quickly as possible and to get our positions out. We ran into headwinds, as they like to say, on the very first day when we had given them an advance copy of the protocol agreement 2 weeks in advance. They had issues with just a few sentences. 5 hours later, we ended up essentially back with the protocol agreement that had been advanced to them 2 weeks prior. That's a microcosm of what we faced. And you can see it. We've had our entire economic proposal out on the table since October 23rd and 24th. What's today? Oh, it's Valentine's Day. And we still have not got any response from them to us on retirement and compensation. So it makes it very difficult. Well, it's impossible. We're not going to negotiate against ourselves. We will negotiate in earnest to achieve a contract that our pilots deserve once they come forward with those missing pieces of the puzzle. And that's the only way we can responsibly go forward. I got off on a rant. I apologize.
No, it's quite all right. So I believe that the company has their status meeting coming up in the first part of March. And then what happens?
They do. They're meeting sometime the first week of March. Then the NMB will work us into their calendar whenever the NMB works us into their calendar.
All right. So patience, I guess, here's the key. Unfortunately, I'd like to get this thing done. I know we're willing and able and are going to bargain in good faith. We hope that the other side does as well.
Right. And when I say whenever the NMB works us into their calendar, it's the reality of the NMB has a lot of caseloads, and they're trying to balance out how they use their mediators and get everything done. And I'm sure they're going to put us together as soon as they possibly can.
All right. Well, sounds good. John, thanks as always. Appreciate your time. Like I said, let's do this again as soon as we get ready to go back into the negotiations and see where we're at that time. So thank you. And as always, good seeing you. And thanks for all your efforts on behalf of the crew force.
All right. So I'm not going to let you off the hook just that quickly, Greg, because I want to.
You're not.
No, I'm not. I am not. Because I want our pilots to know we understand the frustration of where they're at. We are going to get in there and aggressively bargain on your behalf. We are a very offensive-minded negotiating committee. Look, ALPA exists for two reasons, primarily to negotiate great contracts and to aggressively defend those. Our job in that part is to negotiate a contract that's got excellent provisions and language that can't be exploited like we're unfortunately experiencing in 482B and C. Our committee is also charged to enter into deals, and more importantly, or just as importantly, is to not enter into a bad deal. And that's how we're going to approach this. At some point, there's going to be a window that's going to open up that the company will want to close this deal. We'll be ready for that. But until then, we're going to keep going. Offense, offense, offense. And the only off-ramp we're taking is one that leads to a TA that sails through ratification. Thanks for letting me speak my mind.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks. Again, Unscripted, the title, and we lived up to it.
We sure did.
Okay. Okay. With that, thanks again, John. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Greg.